Hello and welcome to this special interview with Professor DIMITRIS CHRISTOPOULOS, head of the International Federation for Human Rights and professor at the University of Athens. Hello, Mr. Dimitris. How are you?
Pleasure to be with you.
Thank you very much. Nabil was sentenced on 31st of December. What's your take on the verdict?
According to us, and not only us, but according to the international community of human rights defenders, Nabil is an emblematic figure. Nabil is par excellence a prisoner of conscience. And he's a political prisoner because he's incarcerated due to his opinions, due to his thoughts. Maybe his thoughts were not liked by the regime, but no civilized state can put someone behind bars because he believes something. I mean, you might consider that some thoughts could be criminalized if you incite to violence.
Yeah.
But Nabil never incited to violence. If Nabil did something, it was to incite to
peace,
to criticism and peace and conciliation. So, yeah, that's why for us Nabil is an emblematic figure, and not only for us, because, you know, Nabil is someone who was well known in his country. He's very influential. He's well known in the international community of human rights defenders, but not only that. So apparently, and I think this is extremely problematic, the main problem with Nabil is the fact that his ideas about non-violence are considered to be dangerous ideas for the regime.
And that's why you think he's behind bars?
That's why he's behind bars, obviously. Because, I mean, otherwise there will have been a proof of any activities of violent nature that he possibly undertook. But this is obviously not the case. So let's make the long story short. Nabil is a political prisoner. It is disgraceful and shameful for our legal civilization to put people behind bars for what they believe, even if what they believe is not liked by their countries. And Nabil is an emblem for us because he symbolizes our defense, our perception of what is a free world. And that's why Nabil will be always there for us, and we will never forget him.
Hopefully. Sheikh Ali Salman was sentenced to life imprisonment due to a malicious case, and the United Nations considered him a prisoner of conscience. Mr. Dimitris, how do you see the sentence against Sheikh Ali Salman?
Life imprisonment. Disaster.
A malicious case as well.
Exactly, for nothing. So that's what I'm telling you. Obviously what is happening in Bahrain, it is a systematic general deterioration of the performance of all the branches of the authority in terms of human rights protection. So it is the judicial, who apparently actually follows some obviously dictated solutions offered by the executive, because otherwise a malicious case leading to life sentence, that is crazy. That is
especially he had his innocence.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So we're talking about cases which could be easily regarded as judicial scandals, and they are judicial scandals. So obviously we have a systematic deterioration, which is not only an issue of the executive, it is also an issue of the judiciary, which raises concerns about impartiality, objectivity, and, after all, independence
as well. Okay.
Of judiciary.
Mr. Dimitris, more than a year has passed since the Al-Wasat was shut down. What is your opinion about press freedom in the kingdom?
Obviously, freedom of expression, along with freedom of association, seem to be the two major individual rights who suffer more today in Bahrain. This is not a symptomatic or an accidental symptom.
It's a systematic.
It's a systematic pattern of a government who is afraid of criticism, is a systematic pattern of an executive authority, of a judicial authority, and a legislative authority who does not trust itself And therefore, this lack of confidence to its own moral credibility leads the authority to make such decisions. And you know, in the long term, these decisions are sign of force, but in the long term, such decisions are signs of weakness, in my eyes. And the first who will pay about them today is freedom of expression and newspapers and journalists who find themselves behind bars or exiled. But in the long term, who will suffer more? A country who is not able to exercise its rights. So it's all about a community, you know.
Yeah.
We human rights defenders do not believe in an egoistic perception of human rights, the individual, his or her rights. No. We stand very concerned about the community as such, about cohesion.
The whole community.
The cohesion,
well, yeah.
yes, the community.
Okay, you just mentioned that someone who's going to suffer. Who do you think is going to suffer on the long term?
I think in the long term, what is at stake is social cohesion in this country and even security. I think that, you know, human rights is about dignity, but it's about long-standing and sustainable peace. There is no peace without justice.
Yeah.
There is no peace without justice. And this is something that someone should recall to the Bahraini authorities. More injustice you commit now.
Yeah, especially that the revolution, if you want to say revolution, the Bahraini revolution is so peaceful.
Exactly.
For the past years, it has been peaceful. And the leader of this revolution, the leaders of this revolution, insist on the peaceful movement of the Bahraini people.
I think now we come to the hardcore of a difficult issue. So what lies behind this feeling of insecurity of the Bahraini authorities vis-à-vis people like Nabil? Why Nabil is regarded as so dangerous, even though he advocates no violence, he advocates peace and so on. So I have the feeling sometimes that there are some hardliners in the authorities that do want to impose themselves by all means, including violence. And that is not good.
That's not good, yeah, on the long term.
In the long term,
Yeah,
exactly.
Mr. Dimitris, do you consider the dissolution of WAD and Al-Wifaq associations as part of the authorities' project to restrict freedom of opinion in the country?
I say to you that the major sacrifices in terms of individual rights are freedom of thought, freedom of expression, and freedom of association. So I consider that we're not talking about symptomatic or accidental violations, but we're talking about a systematic trend of an administration who wants to close the mouth, every mouth that seems to, when it seems to open, might say something which might be considered as a threat for the regime. And in that terms, we see, what we see also in the cases you mentioned is exactly this pattern by the authorities.
Okay. Well, have you asked to visit Bahrain in order to review the status of freedom of expression?
I have asked twice to visit Bahrain, and the first time I received no as an answer. The second time I did not receive an answer.
So you were ignored?
I have been ignored. So I met the ambassador of Bahrain in Paris, where the International Federation for Human Rights has its headquarters. We had a sincere discussion, I have to say, where I expressed my concerns about the systematic deterioration of the human rights.
What was his answer? What was his...
There was no answer, obviously. I mean, this was a decision which is not taken at the level of an ambassador. But I have to tell you that I think it's pitiful. I think it's a shame because, you know, Bahrain has a tradition. I mean, it's a country that we once hoped that this country will be an isle of free spirit, of pluralism, and instead of getting bad examples from the neighborhood, we expected that Bahrain will be able to export its good example in the neighborhood. But what is happening over the last year is that we see that
it's controversial.
It's controversial. It's the neighborhood.
The region.
The region that exports in Bahrain bad examples.
Since we're talking about the level of decision making, I want to ask you about the evaluation, your evaluation about the U.S. and the European Union stances towards the revolution of Bahrain, are they backing the royal family? Are they supporting? We all know they're supporting,
Yes.
but at the decision-making level, do you think
Yeah, I think
it
that's a
comes
very
from there?
critical, very critical and difficult question. I'd say that, okay, obviously with the US, after the Trump administration came, there is a major shift there. Yet we should not use, the Trump administration as an alibi for not doing nothing, because this is what I see in Europe lately. You see, they say Trump. No, don't blame Trump for everything. I mean, look what the Europeans are doing, and because obviously Trump is a newcomer and someone who has an extremely negative impact in the way the United States defend the ideals of human rights in the world. But the problem also lies in the fact that generally there is a new form of governance
In the whole world.
in the whole world that challenges the very idea that people should enjoy rights. So this is what brings together, for example, the President of the United States with the President of Russia, the President of Turkey, the President of Brazil, the Prime Minister of Hungary. It's all about a perception of a political community which is based on security, and human rights is an irreasonable luxury, not to say a threat to security. So what I mean by contextualizing the issue is that when we regard Bahrain, which is a small country, etc., we should be able to see the broader context, the broader geopolitical, political, and legal context, and what kind of pressure and what kind of circumstances are hegemonical in this context today. And I have to tell you that the image we have today is extremely negative. So the problem is not only Bahrain. The problem is the fact that the once powers who could exercise some good pressure to the Bahraini authorities in order to make some good decisions, in order to take the path of pluralism and respect of freedom and dignity.
Apply some reforms in the country.
Apply some reforms in the country, and not doing it. And they are buying off their silence, I'd say, very, very cheaply.
Especially with lifting the ban on sophisticated weapons.
Exactly.
The Trump administration did that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So this is the goal of this silence.
Yes, and we can see this silence everywhere. We are here in Lebanon today. I mean, I come from the European Union. The European Union regards as a refugee crisis the fact that 1 million people came in the European Union of 500 million. And we are today in a country which has 4 million inhabitants, 500,000 of Palestinian refugees and 1 million of Syrian refugees. And disgracefully, the Europeans call the arrival of 1 million in the land of 500 million a refugee crisis. And they're buying off silence over what is happening in Turkey, where we have another authoritarian shift.
Okay.
So you see, what I'm telling you is not something which is aiming only Bahrain. It is a general
targeting
trend
of the region.
Exactly. It's a general trend of the European Union, which seems to buy off very cheaply its own silence over human rights concerns. And this is disgraceful for Europe, to be honest.
Okay, let's get back to our topics. Do you consider banning religious freedom, such as the right to practice Friday prayers, to be a denial of freedom of expression due to the close relationship between freedom of expression and freedom of religion?
I consider that in Bahrain we have an issue of a religion sectarianism, which is to be regarded as a violation to human rights and to freedom of expression. And I believe that this is something that should be seriously considered because dividing a society in such a way might bring difficult issues to the surface. So I think that we should trust the people of Bahrain. I think that, thanks God, there is an extremely open tradition in terms of religious tolerance in the country that we should do our best to safeguard.
To preserve, yeah.
And to preserve. For me, that is a great experience that we should never forget.
Especially Shia should enjoy their rights, religious rights, political rights.
That's what I'm telling you. So this religious tradition is a tradition of openness, is a tradition of tolerance,
Exactly.
and a tradition of peaceful coexistence. So I think what is followed today is a sectarianist, tribalist policy of dividing and ruling and importing easily naturalized Sunnis and so on is something that does not go in the good direction again. And this is something that does not bring in the long term peaceful settlement of difference in societies. Because for me, peaceful settlement of difference is the target. Peaceful settlement.
Peaceful settlement,
yeah.
Well, in light of the absence of freedom of expression in Bahrain, what do you advise activists and all those trying to express their opinion in a climate controlled by an oppressive grip?
I say that in the first place, what we are doing and what we should advocate is the fact that we should continue our pressure. What we're doing here, try to show to the world that things are not going at the good direction in Bahrain. But we should not only exercise pressure to the Bahraini authorities, we should also expose the responsibility of other actors who could exercise pressure to the Bahraini authorities. Because the International Federation for Human Rights, other international NGOs, Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, are not regarded as serious interlocutors by the current Bahraini regime. We are regarded as, they could easily ban our entrance there, as they did to me and others.
We talked before, Bahrain is going to be a member of the United Nations Human Rights Council.
Exactly. So I think we should grasp this. We should
Don't you think it's an opportunity to pressure more?
That's an occasion. Yes, that's an occasion. So, for example, in 1 month, Bahrain becomes a member of the United Nations Human Rights Council. I think that could be an occasion of a sign of a goodwill. In Bahraini prisons, we have sick people, we have old people, we have kids. Let's give a sign that we are ready to open a little bit to the world, to show a symptom of goodwill. I'm not asking tomorrow for release of Nabil. I'm just saying, give a sign that there is a light.
Even if it's not too much, just some signs,
some
little
signs.
things.
Exactly. So I think, not to finish in a pessimist way, I think that starting from March, when Bahrain becomes member of the United Nations.
So this is going to be your message to the government of Bahrain.
Exactly. That will be. It's time for you, it's time for the Bahraini government to show a sign of a goodwill. A sign of a goodwill will be also good for this government also, because this will conceive as a step forward. The more we stuck to the situation we find ourselves today after 2011, the more we enter in the impasse. And generally speaking, from my own historical experience, and allow me now to speak as a professor of political science.
Go ahead, doctor.
If societies face the deadlock that the Bahraini authorities imposed to their community, then there is no space for happy end. And we want happy end. We want good scenarios for societies. And I hope that the Bahraini authorities will grasp a little bit of smart intelligence to understand that maybe it's on their own interest, it's on the interest of the royal family, after all, to keep the country in peace, but a smart peace. A peace which will allow...
stay ruling
exactly. A peace which will allow their ruling, but will allow people to feel dignity.
And absorb all the anger of the people.
Otherwise, as I said to you, no justice, no peace. That's my message.
Dr. Dimitris, thank you very much for this interview.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
All the best.
Dear viewers, we've reached the end of our interview. Thank you very much for watching.